Hi, I'm Mairianna and I'm an addictive eater. It's great to be at our first workshop. It's just fabulous to be here. And I was quite young when a boy told me that I was fat. And I don't know if it was from that point that I realised that I had a problem with food, or I ended up having a problem with food. But, it was to just explode into a road of hell with food and bulimia. And because I was so much younger, I was eating lots of huge amounts of food, and it became a laughing joke at home. And all the plates would be sent to me at the end of the table because I would do the dishes, and I would just sit and pick the food off the plates, and I hated it. And they would laugh at me, and I hated it. I just hated it, and I couldn't stop. And I remember I was about 18. It was a Sunday afternoon after church, after a 3-course meal, fully stuffed, sitting in the toilet reading a magazine about bulimia. And I'm sure the magazine was saying, warning against the dangers of bulimia. But I got hope from that article that there's a way out with this eating and being so fat. And so I tried desperately to make myself sick. And initially it didn't work, and then it started to work. And then I just became really good at it. And it got to the point that it just took over control of my life. Between eating huge amounts of food and throwing up, it was just an absolute living hell. And in between all that, I had a son. And I mean, when I look back now, he was so underweight at birth, and it has to have been, I'm sure, because of the bulimia. And of course, I didn't realise at the time, he was a very he was just very underweight, and I realised today that my eating affected him before he was even born, and addiction took me through the gates of hell, and I lost everything through addiction. I lost my home and my job, and my son was taken off me, and I just could not stop eating, drinking. It was just a horrible way of living. And eventually I walked through the doors of another fellowship, and they kept saying to me, as long as you're not drinking, you're going to be all right. Don't worry about the food, you'll be all right. And slowly I was dying. And I discovered another 12-step fellowship and was going along to that for many years. And they talked about abstinence, and I could never achieve what was discussed in those meetings. And I tried everything that was suggested, and nothing worked. And I've travelled the world looking for answers, going to meetings all over the world, going to conventions all over the UK and all over the world, looking for an answer, and I could never find one that would give me recovery from this, the way that I felt, the way I behaved around food, my actions. And then one day I went to this convention down in Birmingham, which I'd been to often, the heart of the Birmingham Convention. And this woman walked into the room. Now, I had met her several years before that, and she was just a regular member of the fellowship. And she walked into the room that night, and she looked so different. And she was very slim, which I found very attractive, of course. And I was just, how is she? And I was watching her, and she was inexplicably different, like the big book talked about Ebby. Bill talked about Ebby. She was inexplicably different. And I just couldn't believe it. So I asked her, I approached her, and I said to her, do you remember I met you years ago? And she said, no. And I was like, great. And I said, how did you do this? And she said, why don't you come and join us? I'm meeting a newcomer. Come and get a cup of tea with us. And of course, I was so ill. I was like, no, you go and have a cup of tea with you, and I'll go over here and worry a wee bit more and be sick a wee bit longer. And I just couldn't accept her hand of help at all. But she gave me her phone number, and she said, phone me. So 2 weeks later, I was heading to another convention down in Glasgow looking for an answer. And I put on a blouse that I'd worn the week before, and it was so tight in me, I couldn't believe it. And I ripped this blouse off, and I just went crazy. Crazy in my mind, crazy in my head, crazy in my behaviour. My partner said it was the first time ever that she thought she was going to have to phone for psychiatric help. She said I was just crazy. And I had this brilliant idea that I couldn't live like this anymore, that I was going to kill myself. And I was walking to the kitchen to kill myself. And the drama, and my partner was screaming. She was so upset, so worried. And I was shouting at her, pushing her out of the way. There's something wrong with you. You're so sick being with somebody like me. get out of my way, and I had a real peace that I was going to die. And she was saying, please, help, phone somebody, because she knew from the fellowship, phone somebody. And so I shouted out to God, if you exist, if you're there, help me, because I'm going to die today. Oh, the drama, honest to God. And in my head came this voice that was like, phone your sponsor, phone that woman. So I phoned her, and I stomped through the house, and I phoned her, and I was just, I am so desperate, can you help me? And she said, are you ready to go to any lengths? And I said, yes. I said, well, I really felt I was. And yes, I was so desperate. And she said, if you're anything like me, and you put one thing down, something else pops up. You put that down, something else pops up. So you'll use something else, and then you put that down. And she said, why don't you try putting everything down? And I knew in my heart that she was right. I just knew in my heart that what she was saying was right, because I couldn't manage any of this stuff. I couldn't manage any of it. And I remember saying to her, that had been sober for, at that point, 15 years in another fellowship. And she said, oh, you might not have been drinking, but you're certainly not sober. I was mortified. Do you know she was right? She was absolutely right, because there's no comparison to what I had then and what I have today in my life. So she suggested some things for me to do, and I was really frightened. There was one thing she suggested that I did, and that was putting down medication. And up until that point, I'd had 8 years of trigeminal neuralgia, and it was so painful a condition. I was so frightened of putting down pills, and I was so used to taking them. And she suggested speaking to and taking advice about that. And I did that, and the consultant had said, I think that's a really good idea. Well, I nearly fell off my chair. And my sponsor had suggested that by getting out of all the other substances, that maybe that pain will get better. And I couldn't believe her. And today I have no pain. I mean, is that not just incredible? And freedom from food obsession, freedom from pain obsession, freedom from so much. And so she continued to work with me. It took me quite a while to put the food down, and I was trying to pretend that everything was really well, and that I was well, and I put the food down, and and I wasn't purposely playing with food, but I had like these habits that I just kept popping stuff. I was in the food, popping stuff in my mouth. And there came a point that I thought I need to be really honest with her, and I kept phoning her and said, and I've done this and I've done that. And then the next day I thought, that's everything now. And then the next day it would be like, oh no, you need to tell her about that. Oh, and I've done this and I've done that with food. I was like, that's it. Do you remember that, Claire? That's it. I've told her everything now. And then it would be another one. No, I've got to. So I had to phone her for about 2 weeks. I was phoning her every day saying, oh, and I've done this with food and I've done that with food. And I was so ashamed, so mortified, because like it's been shared, it was so secretive. Everything I did about food was so secretive. The buying it, the stealing it, the lying about it, the eating it, the having it in the car, the having it in the house, pretending that I had this big food for my son who never touched any of it. And it was just, the secrecy was awful, and the secrecy of the bulimia, and trying to find a toilet, make sure it worked before I sat there. And today I would have been at the toilet checking that the toilets were working so that I could throw up. And it was just, everything was so controlled, and there was just, I just know life. It was food, thinking about how I'm going to throw it up, where am I going to find food. When I'd lost everything, a friend of mine very lovingly gave me a job in his cafe. And I ate his food, and I stole his money. And he approached me one day and he said, Mairianna, are you stealing from me? And I just said, yes. He said, what are you doing with the money? And I said, I'm eating it. And because he was in recovery in another fellowship, he forgave me. And it's only very recently, in fact, it was the night before I went to New Zealand that I made a proper amends to that man. I met him properly, I went to see him, eventually found him, tracked him down, and made it a proper amends to that man. But I stole from him. I stole so much from him. I stole from my parents. I stole from my dad when he was dying. I stole from my sister. I just to feed this addiction, I could not stop. And today sitting here and thinking, I never think about food. I never think about throwing up. I haven't thrown up. From the age of 18 to 46, when I met my sponsor, I was throwing up every single day. I've been overweight, I've been hugely overweight, and I've been hugely underweight to the point that I was pretending to doctors that I was better than I was. And when I eventually went to the doctor to speak about the bulimia, the very first thing the doctor did was she weighed me. Why did they do that? She weighed me. I was mortified, absolutely mortified. So then I started lying, and I wear my turn-up trousers to the doctor, and I would get the old-fashioned weights, and I would take them and I would put them inside the turnips because I wanted to prove that I was putting on weight, because she was so concerned. The next stage was hospital. I was so underweight, and the next stage was hospital, and I knew that I was going to die and leave my son. And that was really what was pushing me to try and get well, and I couldn't stop. And I was so desperate, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop throwing up. And I'd be holding my son and thinking, I'm going to die and leave this child. I need to get well. And nothing helped. So being in the fellowship today and having direction, and in step 3 it talks about turning your will and your life over to the care of God. Well, I believe today that I've turned my will and life over to the care of my God through the direction of my sponsor. And I had to start that way because I couldn't believe in God. As much as I wanted to and said I did, I couldn't believe in God. But I could believe in her, and I could believe in the people that she had asked me to phone. I could believe in her. So I started there. People have said to me, like, oh, that must create such a dependence. And it's just given me a huge independence. And it's allowed me to then transfer that dependence from my sponsor onto my God that I've come to believe in, which is in my life an absolute miracle, because I ran from that God for years and thought I'll never believe in, can't do that, can't believe in that. And today it's the most important thing in my life. And I used to say, like, oh, sobriety is the most important thing in my life. And today it's like, no, it's not. Sobriety is not the most important. The connection between me and my God is the most important thing in my life. Because if I don't have that, I haven't got sobriety. I'm powerless over all these substances. Therefore, I need a power that has to be the most important thing in my life. And because of that, so many things have changed. The book talks about a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. I don't recognise myself. I don't recognise myself physically because I feel so well. I don't recognise myself emotionally, and spiritually I don't recognise myself. My brother didn't recognise me when he saw me. I changed so much. And I look at my family today, and where I had lost everything, my home, job, everything, I have a beautiful home, I have a beautiful partner. My son is just, I love him to bits, an incredible relationship with him. One of the best bits of advice I ever got was from my sponsor, who said, stay out of his business. You're his mother, stay out of his business, let him make his own decisions. And that is exactly from that day, that is all that I've ever done with him. And our relationship has flourished because I'm not interfering in his life. And I love being his mum. I love the relationship that we have. And I wouldn't have had it if I hadn't started doing what was suggested. And I think that's probably the turning point. I started doing what I didn't want to do. I started doing what was being suggested, and I really didn't want to do it, but I did, and I just did it. And I look at and I have my job. I'm still in the same career that I lost, and that's a God job, because really I shouldn't be in that career. The things that I've done in my life through addiction, I shouldn't be in it. And the senior managers made a decision to allow me to continue in that, and they dealt with registrations, and I'm now working in a job that I used to moan about all the time, and today I love it, and I've gone on and furthered my career and furthered my studies, and I love that. And it started with surrender. I had to be very, very broken. And the 12 and 12 talks about, unfortunately for alcoholics, they have to be absolutely beaten before they'll do anything that's suggested, and that's exactly what I was like. And today, I just love my life. And sometimes I can be a bit moany and grumpy and full of fears, but I'm so grateful I've got the sponsor that I've got, because she'll point out to me things that I don't want to hear, but my God has just helped me to grow, and it's just helped me to grow and get sober and to be of use in this world, and not me. I wanted to be Mrs. Doubtfire, and I never, ever, ever felt like I was any Mrs. Doubtfire, like Kate with the twin setting prayer. I wanted to be this really lovely person. I wanted to be this lovely person that was kind and caring and helpful to everybody, and I could never do it. And today I'm doing it. Today I'm helpful to others, and I love being able to help other people in this fellowship and around me, and I love it. And so it's brought an awful lot of change to me and my family, and I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.